Chapter 6 Up to No Good. Tom had had some humiliating things happen to him over the years. There was that time when his short split while he was doing gymnastics, his clay spun off the wheel in pottery class and hit his art teacher on the face, sending her flying. He bent over to pick up books from the floor in the library and he blew off loudly. He left the toilet cubicle with the toilet roll trailing from the back of his trousers. He was in the school cafeteria and he slipped on some gravy and landed headfirst in the blancmange. He was holding his violin the wrong way round in music class, wondering why he wasn't making a sound until he realised the strings were facing down. Some of the older boys hid his games kit, so he had to play rugby in his pants. He had to put on a tight-fitting all-in-one bodysuit with a tail stuck to his bottom. He was meant to be a cat and he had to sing and dance for a production of the musical Cats. He thought it might be a trick question when his maths teacher asked him what 2 plus 2 was, so he answered 5. He got chalk dust set off his sneezing fit and he sneezed right in his headmaster's face, covering Mr. Thews in snot. But now, here he was, standing in the middle of a hospital ward, wearing a pink frilly nightdress. "It fits you perfectly," laughed Matron. Once again, it was only her that was laughing. Then she checked her watch, which was pinned to her uniform. 1 minute past 8, way past all your bedtimes. Right, children, lights out. Matron began to march in the direction of her office at the end of the ward, and if they were all playing Grandma's Footsteps, she suddenly turned round after a few paces to see if any of the children had moved. Then she did it again, and again. Matron gave one last swiveled look at the children before switching off the light. Click. The ward descended into darkness. Tom hated the dark. He was relieved that some light came in from the giant clock face of the Houses of Parliament not far away from the hospital across the roofs of London. People called the clock tower Big Ben after the huge bell inside that chimed every hour. Bong! The light from the clock face glowed eerily through the tall windows. There was also a small desk lamp in Matron's office. The lady sat there behind the glass, staring out into the gloom. She was scanning the beds in the children's ward for any sign of movement. Silence. Then, out of the silence, Tom heard a sound. It was the sound of a tin opening, then followed the sound of paper rustling. But not just any paper. It sounded like the crinkly silver paper that sweets are wrapped in. Then Tom heard the sound of munching. Tom hadn't eaten since lunchtime. He'd barely eaten his lunch as school dinners were so disgusting. Today it had been liver and boiled beetroot, followed by stewed rhubarb. Lying there on the hospital bed, Tom could feel his tummy rumbling. When he heard another sweet being unwrapped and another, he couldn't help calling out softly in the dark, "Please, can I have one?" "Shh!" came a voice back. Tom was pretty sure it was coming from George's bed. "Please," whispered Tom, "I haven't eaten for ages." "Shh!" came another voice in the dark. "Any louder and you'll get us all into trouble." "I want one," said Tom. The boy must have spoken too loudly, as at that moment, click, the lights in the children's ward flickered back on. Blinking at the brightness, Tom could make out Matron rushing out of her office. "There is no talking after lights out," she shouted. "Now who was talking?" All the children remained silent. You must tell me now who was talking, or you'll all be in deep, deep trouble." She scanned the ward for signs of anyone cracking under pressure. She looked at George, who looked guilty. "Was it you, George?" she demanded. George shook his head. "Speak up, boy!" Everyone from across the room. Even from across the room, Tom could tell George's mouth was full. George tried to speak, but because of the large amount of chocolate in his mouth, he couldn't form words. He murmured. "What have you got in your mouth?" George shook his head and tried to say nothing, but it came out as Matron approached his bed like a crocodile stalking its prey. "George, you are meant to be on a strict diet after your operation, but you are scoffing chocolates again, aren't you?" George shook his head. The lady whipped back his sheet to reveal a large tin of chocolates. The tin was huge. It was the kind that your family might receive at Christmas and would last until next Christmas. "You greedy pig," said the matron. "These are confiscated." With that, she snatched the tin from his hands and whipped a tissue from a nearby box. "Now spit out the one you have in your mouth." Reluctantly, the boy did so. "Who sent you these?" she demanded. "I know it couldn't have been your father. I'm sure they're not allowed chocolate in prison." Tom could tell that George was angry, but the boy was doing his best to keep it in. They came from me local newsagents, replied George. I'm his favourite customer. I bet you are. Look at the size of you. You see, he knows I love these chocolates the most. What is this stupid man's name? Raj, replied George. Raj what? Raj the newsagent. I meant his surname, you foolish child. Dunno. Well, I will trace him, and with any luck, have his shop closed down. After your operation, you are forbidden from eating chocolates, George. Sorry, matron. Sorry isn't good enough. The hospital principal, Sir Quentin Strillers, will have to be told about you defying doctor's orders like this, George. Yes, matron, answered the boy sorrowfully. I'll deal with you in the morning. Now go to sleep, all of you. Matron stalked back to her office. Once again, like Grandma's footsteps, she turned round several times to check the children were as still as statues. Click! The light went out again, and Matron sat in her office. After a moment, the lady did the most incredible thing. She opened the tin and started scoffing the chocolates herself. Matron seemed to like the big purple-wrapped ones the best, as she made her way through them at quite a pace. She'd barely popped one in her mouth when the next one was already being unwrapped and ready for scoffing. Time passed, and the more she ate, the sleepier she became. By 9 o'clock, her eyelids were flickering. Still she ate and ate and ate. Perhaps she hoped the sugar in the chocolates would keep her awake. Strangely, they seemed to be having the opposite effect. By 10 p.m., her eyes were closing for a few seconds at a time. Still she ate and ate and ate. By 11 p.m. she was desperately trying to prop up her head in her hands, but it was becoming heavier and heavier and heavier. The scoffing slowed down too, and soon the chocolate mush dribbled out of her mouth, and her head hit the desk with a loud thud. Through the glass, Matron could be heard snoring. The children on the ward all remained silent for a moment. Then out of the darkness someone whispered, Well done, George. I think the plan's working, he whispered back. George's Cockney accent made his voice stand out. What plan? Asked Tom. Shh, came another voice. Go to sleep, new boy. Stop poking your nose into other people's business, said a girl. Now, let's all get ready to go at midnight. But of course Tom couldn't sleep now, especially now he knew that the children were up to no good. What was going to happen at midnight?